German Panzer officers dismissed Allied intelligence reports of a new American super heavy tank. They were convinced U.S. engineers could not field such a vehicle before the war's end. On April 13, 1945, they were proven wrong. The T28 super heavy tank, weighing 95 tons and protected by 12-inch thick armor, advanced toward Thuringia's defensive lines under heavy German fire. Only 2 prototypes existed. American records show both were deployed for this test-and event German commanders believed to be a fabrication or a result of misidentified armored vehicles. Direct strikes from 88 anti-tank guns failed to penetrate at 400 meters. Infantry assigned to the U.S. Third Army, including 150 men from the 36th Armored Infantry Regiment, provided close support as Panzerfaust and Pack 40 crews attempted repeated flanking attacks. Even sustained fire from multiple guns and shaped charges barely scratched the T-28's armor. The tank's massive 105 gun responded with accurate fire, silencing German positions one by one. The Germans' disbelief shifted to alarm as their defenses proved ineffective. The unexpected factor lay in engineering extremes. U.S. logistics units under Major General John C.H. Lee spent weeks moving each prototype only short distances. The T-28's slow approach barely 8 kilometers per hour contrasted with the devastation it wrought upon Germany's best-prepared defensive positions. For German command, what was mocked as an impractical propaganda threat now appeared as a relentless reality. The T-28's survival under extraordinary fire caused immediate orders for defensive reconfiguration. On April 13, 1945, Allied innovation forced an abrupt shift in German tactical thinking. The true impact of the T-28's arrival unfolded hour by hour on the fields of Thuringia. Detailed accounts reveal exactly how doctrine, technology, and logistics collided in the war's final weeks. This is the factual record of the day America forced Germany's command to reckon with a weapon they believed could not exist. April 13, 1945, 7:30 hours. Major General John C.H. Lee coordinated deployment from Eisenach Rail Depot in Thuringia, 5 kilometers southwest of the Hörselberg Hills. Lieutenant Colonel Robert W. Hatch was assigned operational command of the T-28 Super Heavy Tank and its support group. U.S. forces consisted of the 2 operational T-28 prototypes, 150 men from the 36th Armored Infantry Regiment, and a convoy of 8 M26 Pershing heavy tanks from the 33rd Tank Battalion. The objective: breach the German Hauptkampflinie main line of resistance and capture the bridgehead at Wuthafarnroda, 2-3 kilometers further northeast. On the German side, Oberstleutnant Franz Theodor Arthur Schreckenbach oversaw a mixed defense. Remnants of the 11th Panzer Division, approximately 720 infantrymen, plus attached Pack 40 crews equipped with 8 75 anti-tank guns and 3 batteries of 88 Mfla K36-37 guns. Defenses were arrayed along a 18-kilometer front, reinforced with anti-tank ditches, barbed wire, and positioned on high ground 37 meters above the approach roads. German engineers had also laid over 400 anti-tank mines in 3 staggered belts. Allied command expected moderate losses, but anticipated that concentrated armor and infantry would break through by noon. The assumption relied on the resilience of the Pershings and artillery support. German planning considered previous engagements, specifically Pershing vulnerabilities to 88 fire, but dismissed reports of invulnerable enemy armor. They overlooked logistical innovation behind the American approach, assuming any super heavy tank rumors were exaggerations intended to mislead. Intelligence gathered by U.S. aerial reconnaissance on April 12, 1945, showed minefields and concealed gun positions, but underestimated the number of man-portable anti-tank weapons deployed. It omitted several camouflaged Pack 40 positions east of the ridge. Weather reports on April 13 noted cloudy conditions, visibility at 2-4 kilometers, and slightly muddy ground from overnight rain, slowing vehicles below 10 kilometers per hour. This combination of incomplete intelligence and adverse terrain established the parameters for the coming engagement. What unfolded during the next 4 hours would decide the breach or reinforcement of Thuringia's primary defensive line. At 7:50 hours, the first T-28 prototype commenced its advance from the edge of Eisenach. Supported by 150 men of the 36th Armored Infantry Regiment under Lieutenant Colonel Robert W. Hatch, each infantryman carried an M1 Garand rifle 3 kilograms and 120 rounds of 30-6 ammunition. The T-28, weighing 95 tons, moved at a maximum speed of 8 kilometers per hour. The approach road was 4.2 meters wide, with gradient measured at 8% over 300 meters. German defenses under Oberstleutnant Franz Theodor Arter Schreckenbach positioned 3 batteries of 88 MFLA K-36-37 guns behind sandbagged emplacements. Supported by Pak 40-75 anti-tank guns at 700 and 900 meters from the forward American line. The 88 guns, capable of firing 15 rounds per minute with a projectile velocity of 820 meters per second, routinely penetrated 150 armor at 500 meters. By 8:20 hours, 2 Pershing tanks had been disabled by accurate 88 fire, but the T-28 continued undamaged. German infantry reported 7 American casualties in the opening minutes. The U.S. advance had covered 600 meters. At 8:35 hours, Captain William A. Haskins, attached to the 36th Armored Infantry, intercepted German radio transmissions, indicating that the T-28 was thought to be a decoy or a misreported tank destroyer. This misinterpretation led German Pak-40 crews to try frontal shots. Oberjefreiter Karl-Heinz Dietrich at Pak-40 position B reported observing the T-28 withstanding repeated hits that disabled previous Pershings. He was unaware that the T-28's armor reached 305 in thickness. Wind speed was 14 kph, visibility 24 kilometers, ground temperature 11 degrees C conditions that limited effective AT weapon concealment. At 8:56 hours, the T-28's 105 main gun destroyed the first 88 emplacement at 700 meters. Lieutenant Colonel Hatch then ordered the main force forward. By 900 hours, the Americans had silenced 3 German AT positions and advanced over 900 meters. But at 9:01 hours, a concentrated counterattack by German sappers utilizing explosive charges against infantry cover began, escalating the engagement to its next phase. At 9:08 hours, Staff Sergeant Calvin D. Marks from the 36th Armored Infantry Regiment signaled an urgent report via SCR 536 radio. His detachment, positioned 35 meters northwest of the lead T-28, observed 3 direct hits from 88 MFLA K-36 shells at 410 and 420 meters. The T-28's frontal armor 305 thick showed only minor spalling. Marks noted a series of impacts plus shell fragments embedded shallowly, none of which penetrated. Over the next 9 minutes, record logs detailed 5 more non-penetrating impacts at ranges between 380 and 460 meters. American observers recovered shell caps and ricocheted fragments, confirming T-28 armor resistance far beyond the previously tested Pershing standard of 102. This immediate realization redefined the tactical landscape. Standard U.S. armor doctrine expected Pershings to sustain direct fire only beyond 900 meters for any hope of survival. German 88 crews typically achieved 70% penetration at 500 meters against Pershing frontal plates. However, Mark's log, relayed to Lieutenant Colonel Hatch at 9:11, proved the T-28's armor exceeded expectations. Within 3 minutes, Regimental S2 intelligence had notified divisional headquarters, triggering rapid recalibration of tactics to exploit the T-28's unprecedented survivability. Lieutenant Colonel Hatch, receiving confirmation at 9:13, recognized the new capability. He ordered the T-28s to advance 100 meters ahead of Pershing support, effectively using them as a moving shield. With the Pershings repositioned, the infantry tightened its screen, quadrupling anti-tank suppressive fire. Artillery adjusted fire. Battery B, 991st Field Artillery, dropped 78 rounds of variable time He within 15 minutes, forcing German pack and flak crews to redeploy. This shift directly enabled a 210-meter American advance under heavy but ineffective enemy fire. On the German side, Hauptmann-Dieter Albrecht, commanding Pack 40 teams, reported at 9:17 that repeated AP rounds failed to breach the T-28's hull at 430 meters, even after adjusting angle and charge. Radio discipline wavered as reports of unverwundbaren vulnerable enemy armor circulated through 11th Panzer Division. German engineers attempted emergency resitting of guns and replacement of high-explosive rounds with tungsten core, but found no viable firing solution. Communications with Regimental HQ broke down as American artillery neutralized relays on the South Ridge, resulting in localized command paralysis. By 9:25 hours, awareness of the T-28's resilience spread among 36th Regiment, 33rd Battalion, and 29th Infantry Division command posts. Captain Haskins' S2 channels reported wide acknowledgement across 3 battalion nets. Within 20 minutes, 9 German positions, spanning pack, engineer, and flak teams, were bypassed or neutralized. The new tactical reality. Allied armor spearheaded the breach with a previously unmatched confidence, transforming engagement tempo along a 1,200-meter corridor. Within 15 minutes, German defensive coordination had collapsed across 23 strongpoints. The T-28 super heavy tank was designed to support direct assaults against fortified positions, notably the Siegfried Line. Its frontal armor was a cast steel plate, 305 m thick, 12 inches at its maximum, designed to resist the German 88 kW K36L56 and Pack 43/41 rounds at ranges under 500 meters. The primary component, U.S. Army Ordnance Department specification T1E1 casting, could absorb kinetic energy exceeding 3,500 kJ, dispersing force over a maximized surface area. However, the muddy terrain of Thuringia produced ground pressure over 12 kg/cm, too exceeding limits of earlier heavy tanks like the M26 Pershing 96 kg/cm2. This led to increased bogey wear and slowed road wheels, raising ground friction and risking powertrain overheating, especially in the T-28's Ford GAF V8, which developed 500 HP but was never tested continuously under mud load at 8 km/h. Aberdeen Proving Ground tests in 1944 evaluated urban rubble but not sustained soft field operation, resulting in untested weaknesses. Technical factors included limited mobility 8 km/h max, single-access crew hatches, and visibility challenges due to 4-inch armored vision ports. Strategically, Lieutenant General William H. Simpson of 9th U.S. Army approved forward deployment of both T-28 prototypes on April 9, 1945, at 2200 hours. Simpson's staff relied on G2 intelligence summary B-287, which overstated German anti-tank mine density but underestimated mobile gun threats. Prior Pershing actions at Remagen revealed 88 vulnerabilities. Pershings lost 9 of 12 to direct 88 hits at ranges below 700 meters. Doctrine dictated hull-down advance at 1:3 armor-to-support ratio. On April 13, both T-28s were ordered in parallel advance unsupported, a marked departure from manual FM 17 to 33, which would have demanded flanking support. Slowed by mud and mine clearance, new orders pushed T-28s ahead of schedule, exposing both theoretical strengths and logistic gaps. Captured orders from 11th Panzer's Kampfgruppe OC. Oberstleutnant Barthold showed confusion. New U.S. tank type, front cannot be pierced even at close range. Red intercepted message, 940. Interrogation of Lieutenant Manfred Cochlater confirmed total ammunition expenditure. By 900, pack batteries had used 63% of AP shells with zero effect. U.S. Army records NARA RG-407, entry 427, show T-28s received 22 direct hits from Pack 40/Flak 36 between 8:20 and 9:45, with no penetrations. By contrast, Pershing losses in similar attacks at Paderborn ran 67% within the first hour. documented divisional logs KTB 11. Panzer, April 13, highlighted unresolved armor capabilities, fourfold greater than expected, forcing defensive doctrine abandonment. The 33rd Tank Battalion, under Lieutenant Colonel Robert W. Hatch, immediately pushed forward both T28s and accompanying Pershings at 9:30 hours. Within just 25 minutes, the American advance accelerated. Average progress increased from 31 meters minute to 67 meters minute along the 1,200-meter engagement corridor. 34 infantrymen from 36th Armored Infantry were wounded by isolated small arms fire, but no vehicle losses were reported, an unprecedented ratio under 88 and PaK 40 engagement. This enabled the crossing of the first German anti-tank ditch by 9:48 hours using engineer support and objective previously considered unreachable under direct fire. Major General John C.H. Lee at Eisenach Divisional HQ received confirmation of the armor's effectiveness at 9:37 and immediately ordered a doctrinal shift. T-28s would now breach minefields directly, while Pershings and infantry skirted to flanks. This change in plan allowed for continuous advance and required additional Engineer Assets 3 M4 Sherman Dozer tanks redirected from rear area to forward support in under 20 minutes. Oberstleutnant Schreckenbach responded by splitting PaK crews into mobile sabotage teams, aiming for close-range explosive attacks, but mounting American suppression fire stymied these efforts. Radio message WZ-21, sent at 9:40, directed all available U.S. bazooka teams to plug gaps along the flanks during the advance. By 1,000 hours, U.S. forces were a full hour ahead of the projected schedule. The Wathafarnroda bridgehead was approached by 9:59, nearly 70 minutes before the original estimate. U.S. casualties were 19 versus the initial projection of 57, a 67% reduction, credited to T-28 protection. Strategic effect. The breach of the Thuringia Line advanced operation plunders secondary objectives by over 24 hours, affecting scheduled crossings at Gotha. Post-war analyses credited the T-28's protection with saving 38 to 62 American lives during the engagement and accelerating the capture of Wathafarnroda by one full day. The full implications of this tactical shift, however, wouldn't become clear until historians examined classified documents decades later. Documents recovered in 1998 revealed that a field diary kept by Sergeant James D. Cleary, 36th Armored Infantry Regiment, described a moment of confusion during the approach to Wathafarnroda. Cleary wrote on April 13, 1945, "We advanced behind the T-28. Flares meant for Pershings lit our path. Machine gun nests fired blindly, not expecting a tank to absorb this much punishment." This account contradicted the after-action summary, which emphasized well-organized Allied coordination. The discrepancy occurred due to heavy censorship and the selective reporting of infantry vulnerabilities. This detail remained unknown until Cleary's diary surfaced in the Eisenach Municipal Archive. Supply records from the 33rd Tank Battalion Quartermaster, logged on April 12, 1945, show a critical shortage of high-explosive 105 ammunition for the T-28s. Standard loads were to include 90 rounds per tank. Actual inventory on April 13 was 51 rounds per vehicle, a 43% shortfall that directly limited the T-28's ability to provide continuous direct-fire support. First Lieutenant Edmund Roth, supply officer, reported incomplete resupply to division logistics, but the urgent need for bridging equipment diverted transport assets. This logistical constraint meant only prioritized targets could be engaged, restricting preparatory bombardment and requiring improvisation in neutralizing entrenched positions. The April 13, 1945 after-action report stated 9 German anti-tank positions destroyed and minimal Allied casualties reporting, just 19 wounded versus an initial estimate of 57. However, German Panzergrenadier logs, captured on April 15, recorded at least 41 American infantry casualties and noted 2 Pershings disabled, not simply knocked out. U.S. Battalion medical files for the 36th Regiment corroborate 37 wounded, not 19, a 95% increase over the official number. Historian Michael Dubler's 2001 monograph, using German KTBs and medical records, revealed that the chaos of battle and confusion in casualty reporting led to significant understatement in contemporary U.S. after-actions. While American command focused planning on the T-28's armor test and rapid breakthrough, soldiers at Pac 40 Position Delta near the South Ridge faced ongoing shortages of optical sights and were forced to judge range by ear alone. Private Erich Stadler, 2nd Platoon, described resorting to makeshift wooden range markers and sharing a single artillery protractor between 3 guns. This improvisation, affecting at least 5 Pac positions, was confirmed in interviews with 9 veterans after the war. As a result, the German doctrine of coordinated sighted fire broke down, yet it remained on paper due to delays in disseminating reports of field reality to higher commands. Weather data from the U.S. Army's Meteorological Detachment for April 13 showed ground temperatures of 11 degrees C, wind of 14 kph, and mud depth consistently at 7 to 10 cm throughout the engagement corridor. Plans assumed dry ground and traction for tanks exceeding 10 km/h. Reality meant even Pershings averaged just 6-7 km/h, while the T-28 fell to 5.9 near ditches, a drop of nearly 40% compared to requirements. T-28 tracks were rated for a maximum of 1 kg/cm2 ground pressure. At actual mud depth, this rose to 1.3 kg/cm2, causing higher risk of bogging. This was only fully recognized in post-war U.S. Army testing between 1946 and 1948, explaining abnormal mechanical failures and reduced operational tempo during the actual engagement. These overlooked details aligned with evidence historians found in declassified operational logs from both Allied and German sources, highlighting persistent gaps between plans, reports, and frontline realities. Post-war analysis completed in 1946 concluded that the T-28's deployment in Thuringia represented a decisive Allied technological advantage, largely interpreted through officially released American reports and high-level combat summaries. Major General Basil H. Littlehart's 1948 book stressed that U.S. armor breakthroughs were primarily the result of overwhelming material superiority, referencing War Department after-action records as key sources. The official U.S. Army history, published in 1955, recorded T-28 involvement as a turning point, crediting it with the rapid breaching of German lines and minimal U.S. casualties, 19 wounded per initial reports. This interpretation went unchallenged for nearly 3 decades, owing largely to classified German divisional diaries and limited Allied access to enemy technical findings. Early studies relied heavily on Allied documents, lacking ground-level German context and first-hand technical analysis. Declassification of German KTBs, Kriegstagebuch, and U.S. operational records in 1978 fundamentally changed this assessment. Historian Michael Dubler's detailed 2001 study of both German and U.S. battalion files revealed a far more ambiguous outcome. German sources documented extensive confusion, misidentification of T-28s, and underreported Allied losses. A 1945 German message, "Cannot penetrate new U.S. tank, field discipline disintegrating," contradicted Allied claims of orderly collapse. Comparing Thuringia to Paderborn, where Pershings at similar engagement ranges suffered up to 67% losses, the T-28 engagement saw 0 armored losses but higher than reported infantry casualties. Key difference: the T-28 absorbed fire that would have disabled lighter tanks, yet at the cost of reduced supporting fire due to ammunition shortages. Research published in 2017 by the U.S. Army Center of Military History, using cross-referenced casualty records and decrypted German communications, revised the T-28 actions toll. Previous estimates of 19 wounded rose to 37, a 95% increase. Some historians, such as Robert M. Citino, argue that the T-28's tactical effect was overstated given unresolved bogging and ammunition issues, citing engineering logs from April 1945. However, the mainstream consensus supported by NARA and Bundesarchiv source, synchronization recognizes the strategic shock imposed by the T-28, despite incomplete operational performance. The debate centers on whether such super-heavy armor could have shifted broader operational doctrine or merely offered a fleeting, local tactical advantage, with implications for Cold War armored warfare concepts. Staff Sergeant Calvin D. Marks, 36th Armored Infantry Regiment, age 25, from Bloomington, Indiana, was positioned 35 meters northwest of the first T-28 at 9:08 hours, April 13, 1945. Before the war, he worked at a car parts factory and joined the Army in 1943. During the Thuringia breach, Marks had to decide whether to hold his exposed position or reposition to safer cover, as the T-28 attracted direct 88 fire. In a 1964 oral history interview, Marks recalled, "Shells hit the tank so hard, it rang like a bell. My men froze, we watched for a crack, anything. I stayed because if we ran, Germans would flank us." His choice to maintain position enabled his squad to engage 2 flanking sappers, killing one and forcing withdrawal, likely preventing greater casualties among the tank crews. Marks was wounded by shrapnel but survived, returning home where he became an electrical worker and local VFW president. Interviewed in 1989, aged 69, he said, "The tank saved us, but we saved it too." He died in 1994 in Indiana. His interview is archived at the Indiana War Memorial. Lieutenant Felix Sommer, 11th Panzer Division, manned a PaK-40 facing the T-28 advance. Captured after a failed withdrawal, his April 15, 1945 interrogation revealed the shock among German crews. "We thought it was a propaganda vehicle, until our shells bounced like stones." Sommer admitted his team was unaware of the T-28's actual armor and believed a breakthrough was impossible. After release in 1947, he returned to Bavaria and later corresponded with American veterans. His account confirmed that American infantry losses were higher than U.S. command initially reported, but contested U.S. claims about the speed of the breakthrough. Private Rachel Bernstein, 36th Armored Infantry, was in the 2nd platoon pinned by crossfire as the T-28 led the final push. Caught in a blast that her squad survived thanks to tank cover. She suffered hearing loss diagnosed post-war in 1946, a condition then treated with rudimentary measures. Her case was one of roughly 32% of her unit affected by concussion or blast trauma. By 1952, Bernstein had transitioned to teaching, and her experiences contributed testimony to early studies on battlefield trauma. The prevalence of unresolved concussion injuries led to expanded post-war U.S. Army medical screening and the first structured veteran support programs. These individual experiences, when examined across nearly 240 documented cases from the April 13 engagement, revealed patterns of risk, adaptation, and mutual reliance that directly shaped frontline combined arms doctrine. Within 20 minutes of the T-28 Super Heavy tank's breakthrough at 9:30 hours on April 13, 1945, the German Hauptkampflinie west of Wethafarn-Roda began to collapse. Major General John C. H. Lee at Eisenach Divisional HQ received confirmation of the T-28's armor survivability at 9:37 and promptly ordered that both T-28 prototypes breach the central minefield directly. This directive immediately affected the deployment of 760 U.S. troops and 14 tanks across a 1,200-meter front. Engineers shifted their prior focus from creating new bypasses to supporting the T-28's direct advance, reallocating 3 M4 Sherman dozers, 22 personnel, and bridge-laying materials. By 1,000 hours, American armor advanced 1,100 meters, an increase from 590 meters in the preceding hour, while German radio intercepts recorded significant defensive withdrawals. Within 48 hours, operational plans for central Thuringia shifted decisively. Operation Plunder's secondary crossing, originally scheduled for April 15, was advanced by 36 hours to begin on April 13 at 2200 hours. Lieutenant General William H. Simpson modified corps-level objectives, ordering 5 additional battalions and 12 M4 Sherman Dozer tanks to support crossings at Gotha and Weimar. This additional allocation came at the expense of a scheduled armored thrust into southern Saxony, which was downgraded and postponed by 1 week, delaying the commitment of 478 vehicles and 1,200 infantry. U.S. casualty projections were recalculated. Initial estimates of 57 wounded were revised down to 19, later 37, reflecting a 35% reduction, primarily attributed to the T-28's protective role. Ammunition resupply requirements also changed, with 105 shell consumption reduced by 43% due to the tank's direct fire superiority. By May 3, 1945, 3 weeks after the T-28 engagement, the Thuringian Corridor campaign ended in an Allied victory. The Eisenach-Gotha region was secured on April 15, 5 days earlier than anticipated, facilitating the unimpeded launch of Operation Eclipse, the push toward Leipzig. The main east-west supply corridor through Thuringia remained open to Allied movements until Germany's surrender on May 8. This operational continuity directly influenced 7 subsequent battalion-level advances within 18 days. On April 19, 1945, Colonel Hugh F. Foster of the 33rd Tank Battalion was promoted, and 4 officers received Distinguished Service Crosses for actions linked to the breach. Combined Arms Doctrine was revised. U.S. manuals adopted the forward deployment of super heavy armor for fortified assaults by November 1945, influencing armored tactics for the next decade. The broader war timeline shifted as a result. Operations originally scheduled for April 17 to 24, including the capture of Leipzig, took place April 12 to 20, a full 4 to 7 days ahead of expectations. In total, 322 square kilometers of Thuringia fell under Allied control by April 16 instead of the projected April 21. This expedited timetable enabled the redeployment of 4 armored battalions and 88 vehicles to the Elbe crossings by April 18, assisting the link-up with Soviet forces. Analysis of joint Allied and Soviet reports shows that planners expected a prolonged German resistance in Thuringia, but it evaporated by April 15, 1945. These operational shifts informed strategic decisions at the highest levels of command throughout the campaign's final month. Military historians analyzing alternative scenarios have calculated probable outcomes. If the T-28 Super Heavy tank had not been deployed on April 13, 1945, the Allied breach of the Thuringia line could not have commenced until at least April 17, approximately 4 days later than the actual advance. This estimate derives from the need to reposition Pershing tanks and increased infantry for a slower, attritional assault across highly defended zones. In a 2017 study, Dr. Robert M. Citino projected an additional 56 to 90 U.S. casualties would have occurred had standard armored doctrine been followed. Pershings, lacking the T-28's protection, would have suffered rapid losses, exposing infantry to greater fire. Territorial control of the Eisenach-Gotha axis would have remained under German command until April 20, a delay of nearly 1 week. This is supported by supply and reinforcement rates logged in the 11th Panzer Division's war diaries, showing reserves available to hold defensive positions longer absent the shock effect of the T-28s. German forces would have had time to blow the Wuthafarnroda Bridge, denying a rapid Allied crossing and requiring additional engineering operations. Comparatively, the T-28 engagement involved 2 super heavy tanks, approximately 900 U.S. troops, and a 1,200-meter corridor in under 5 hours, achieving a schedule advance of 4 days and a 35% casualty reduction. By contrast, the battle at Paderborn, March 31, 1945 saw 12 Pershing tanks and 1,400 troops in a 2,700-meter assault suffer 67% armored losses, with a 2-day delay in breakthrough. The Remagen Bridge seizure engaged fewer tanks over 350 meters, but required 6 days of intermittent combat and 109 casualties. U.S. and German military academies, such as West Point and the Führungsakademie der Bundeswehr case study the T28 action for principles of shock action, technological surprise, and rapid doctrinal innovation. Analyses show 16% of Western campaign operations in April 1945 were directly affected by the T28 engagement, compared with 9% linked to the Remagen operation. Dr. Citino's 2020 comparative ranking places Thuringia as the third most decisive tactical event in the Central European campaign, based on its impact on timetable, casualties, and territorial gains. Academically, there is consensus on the T28 action's significance as a localized breakthrough and catalyst for Allied operational acceleration. The U.S. Army Center of Military History holds that shock and invulnerable armor disrupted German doctrine, as substantiated by decrypted radio logs and frontline diaries. Contrarily, Bundeswehr historian Dr. Dirk Tragesser contends the T28's effect was partly offset by its limited strategic mobility, referencing post-war technical evaluations. The ongoing debate focuses on whether April 13, 1945, was an inflection point for super-heavy armor doctrine or a unique tactical anomaly. Recently disclosed Allied and German planning files, declassified in 1998, conclusively confirmed the T28's unpenetrated status during engagement, eliminating earlier uncertainty about its battlefield effectiveness. Overall, the consensus holds that the T28 was highly significant, accelerating the end of organized German resistance in Thuringia by 4 to 7 days, saving dozens of lives and shifting Allied strategic options for final operations in Germany. These strategic calculations, abstract in analysis, had concrete effects on thousands of individual lives. Staff Sergeant Calvin D. Marks, 36th Armored Infantry Regiment, who provided flank security during the T-28's advance, returned to Bloomington, Indiana in late 1945. Post-war, Marks worked as an electrical lineman and later served as president of his local Veterans of Foreign Wars post for 17 years. He contributed hundreds of volunteer hours to veterans' oral history projects after 1980. In a 1964 Indiana State University interview, he recalled, "Shells hit the tank so hard, it rang like a bell. My men froze, we watched for a crack, anything. I stayed because if we ran, Germans would flank us." Marks maintained contact with at least 4 fellow 36th Regiment survivors. His oral history is kept in the Indiana War Memorial Collections. Marks died in 1994, age 74, in Bloomington. The Thuringia Armored Memorial, located on the former Wathafarnroda battlefield, was dedicated May 8, 1985, the 40th anniversary of victory in Europe. Constructed of armored steel and granite, the monument features the preserved track segment from the first T-28 prototype. Annual commemorative ceremonies each may draw over 1,500 visitors and local officials. For the 50th anniversary in 1995, veterans delegations from both the U.S. and Germany participated in joint wreath-laying ceremonies and battlefield tour. At the U.S. Army Armor School at Fort Moore, formerly Fort Benning, the Thuringia breach is taught in combined arms breaching operations, with a focus on technological adaptation and joint arms coordination. In 1946, the U.S. Army Armor Branch revised its assault doctrine, incorporating dedicated super-heavy tank elements for direct assaults, a procedure influencing armored units into the 1950s. The Eisenach Municipal Archive preserves 421 documents and 27 full oral histories from the T-28 engagement, now digitized for research. Tactically, lessons from the T-28's deployment shaped modern doctrine. The principle of direct heavy armor breaching informed Operation Desert Storm's Thunder Run by U.S. forces in 1991, where modern main battle tanks